Good evening, everyone. The time is now 5 p.m. and the Belton Independent School District Board of Trustees are now convening a special meeting on Tuesday, November 28, 2023. A quorum of board members is present, and we must note for the record that Ms. McDonald will not join us tonight. This meeting has been duly called, and notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. The first item on the agenda is public comments. Becca, do we have? We have none. All right. So moving on to item number 3, Athletics Facilities Workshop. Dr. Smith?
Board, it is a pleasure to see you again. I feel like I haven't seen you in forever because we had a week of a holiday there. So thanks for being here tonight. This is a specially called board meeting to follow up on our last workshop where we started talking about facilities and in particular athletic facilities. One of the things our board asked is that we start to know and understand capacity for even engaging in some of these conversations. And so welcome Jennifer Ritter, who you all know from our work in the past and who's a great resource and asset for us. Jennifer has another commitment at another school district tonight first, and she agreed to prioritize Belton ISD, which we're very thankful for. And
don't tell them.
Yeah, we won't. We're not saying a word to that other district down the road. But we're going to let Jennifer go ahead and walk through some presentation. We ask you, please ask her questions along the way. This is more of a workshop type setting. Please ask questions along the way. Jennifer does need to hit the road in about a half hour, and at that point we're going to pause. We'll recess and make sure everybody has dinner as well so we can continue our workshop. But we wanted to get Jennifer the opportunity to talk to us a little bit. So thanks for being here, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for having me. Always good to see you all again. So we're going to kind of just do some basic rehash that's going to be familiar to all of you, and then talk about some specifics that are affecting capacity now at this moment in time. So as a reminder for the board, school districts are limited on what you can do to finance new construction. You basically have to vote it for anything new, meaning adding square footage or building a new facility. It has to be voted in either May or November. In the general election date, you still can do maintenance tax notes. They don't require a bond election, but that's not for new construction. That's just for renovation. And those are actually paid out of the M&O side of the ledger as opposed to the interest and sinking or debt side of the ledger, which is usually more constrained to begin with. So probably not a good option. Unlimited tax bonds are the ones that you vote. They're paid from the interest and sinking of the INS or the debt portion of the tax rate. They're a safe investment because they do have the taxing authority of the district, even though it's limited to 50 cents when you issue on the INS tax rate. If for some reason the economy in Belton were to collapse and you had to levy 55 cents, you are agreeing to do so. So that's why it's a safe investment. It says they may qualify for the permanent school fund guarantee. They will, assuming there is money in the permanent school fund guarantee, which there is, and that's the state program that basically puts the AAA guarantee of the state of Texas on top of your AA minus, giving you an even better interest rate. They do qualify for state assistance. Belton doesn't currently receive state assistance on its bond issues, but maybe that could change at some point in the future. So once you do vote this, it takes about 3 months, assuming that you want it to go as quickly as possible, to issue after a successful bond election. So with the May election, we're looking at probably July, August timeframe. November, February, March is probably a little bit easier to sell. So since we last spoke, and this looks a little compressed, I apologize, there's been a change in interest rates. So, which is going to come as no shock to anyone. That green bar graph essentially is the current weekly average in the municipal bond market. We're on the far right-hand side. You can sort of visually see what's happened to it over the last year and a half, 2 years, as the Fed has continued to raise interest rates to fight inflation. We've gone along with those interest rates that you're seeing in terms of mortgages and everything else. So that box there in the upper right-hand corner says that only 12% of the time in the last 10 years have interest rates been higher than they are today. So we are selling in a high interest rate environment. What that means realistically is not horrible. We are still selling for 20-year bonds, and yours would be closer to 30, but my most recent comparison would be a 20-year bond. They're still selling in the 3.95% range, so it's not horrible, but compared to when we were selling at 2%-ish type of range, they certainly have increased since then. So that does impact our capacity. In terms of capacity, what we ultimately look at, and we haven't had to look at too closely with Belton recently, is the 50-cent test. So the Attorney General says at the time that you sell a bond issue, you can't intend to have a interest and sinking tax rate greater than 50 cents at the time of issuance. Well, your current rate is $39.42, so you obviously have more than 10 cents of capacity. But we'll come back to this because some things have changed, not with Belton, but with the state. So what we looked at is if you intend to do another bond election like last time where there's no increase in the INS rate at all. We haven't looked at what you could get if you were willing to increase it. So this is just, we're going to maintain 39, call it 39 and a half pennies of INS tax rate. The capacity is somewhere between, it's a pretty broad range, call it 52 million up to 64 million for no tax increase with the November of 2024 election. That's based on the higher interest rate than we've seen recently. That's based on the existing debt profile where your debt stretches out for not quite 30 years anymore, but almost. I think it's 28 years. State assistance, of which you're receiving none. And then the taxable assessed valuation in the district. We've kind of pulled back, and we'll talk about that in terms of growth in the tax base as well. And as always, if growth exceeds expectations, you'll have more capacity than this. But we'll kind of talk about what's driving these and why we're not terribly confident in these numbers to begin with. Hopefully they're too conservative, but I'll get into that a little bit. So obviously the tax-based growth is the largest factor. As you all know, the state voters passed in November a $100,000 homestead exemption, which essentially took $100,000 off the value for schools that you're collecting. That'll be felt in this current fiscal year. The appraisal districts at the time they did it publish it both ways, right, with the $40,000 homestead exemption and the $100,000 homestead exemption for the current fiscal year, so we're now applying the 100. That's not an ongoing thing, so there's a one-time hit to the growth in the tax base, and then thereafter you should continue to grow as you have been growing, assuming, obviously the economy has slowed down a little bit just given where interest rates are in the housing market. So we're assuming 7.5% growth next year, followed by 5% for 3 years, and then 3%, and then it drops even more after that. That may be too conservative, and that's certainly something that we can look at. It will have an impact, but that's where we're starting, so I just wanted you to have that background of where we're starting. I think there for a couple of years you were 15-ish% in terms of the growth. Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah.
So we're already starting at half, which is maybe a little more conservative, but again, we've always planned conservatively. In terms of the interest rate, I mentioned that we were selling 20-year debt at slightly under 4%, but because we're looking at potentially an election in November of 2024, more than a year away, or a year away at this point, more than a year away before we can actually issue the bonds, we're assuming a higher interest rate than what you would currently get in the market of 5.12%. I don't know where interest rates are going to be, probably none of us do, but there is sort of, bond markets are starting to believe the Fed will start to decrease interest rates next year. Whether that'll happen or not, I'm not 100% sure, but that there's been a lot of pressure in fighting inflation and sort of raising interest rates and slowing down the economy as a result of that. So I think we're now in a position where we don't assume that interest rates will continue to skyrocket. Will they come down? I don't know. And there's, what could happen globally with wars and everything else could have an impact on that as well. So we are conservative on the interest rate. At this point in time, probably at least 75 basis points or 0.75% over where you currently sell today. So here are the kind of wild cards and why I say I'm not terribly confident in our numbers at the moment. Because the statewide voters approved the constitutional amendment to raise the homestead exemption from $40,000 to $100,000, there's a couple of things happening. So as in all prior times when the state raised the homestead exemption, for bonds, you were intended to be held harmless. So the state says, we will make you whole for the amount of money that you lost. Well, what's happened in the outstanding life of Belton ISD bond series has gone from there at the bottom 15,000 homestead to 25 to 40,000, and you are receiving payments for that. It's a very complicated spreadsheet because it's not just going from 40 to 100. We have to look at every bond series when it was issued and what homestead exemption was in place at the time that it was sold, and that's what TEA does as well. So TEA has a spreadsheet that shows what your payment should be for that hold harmless. They have not yet updated it to reflect the $100,000 homestead exemption. So we have guessed. We think we know what it should look like, but ultimately TEA is the source that will tell us what it looks like. They're the ones who make the payment. If we think they're wrong, we can have an argument with them. We did notice that they were maybe wrong on a couple, but a little bit in Belton's favor on some of the older ones, so we're gonna let that go.
Yeah.
And not say anything about it. But it is a complicated spreadsheet. I'm sure they were getting ready when before the election was called, but those haven't been updated yet. So when we looked at it, because for Belton, there are a lot of rooftops, that's a large number in terms of what the dollar amount could be of the hold harmless for debt, which we'll talk about in a minute as well. So I think I've covered most of that. Okay, and it doesn't impact any new bonds that you would sell. So obviously for new bonds, the election that we're talking about potentially in 2024, whenever it may be, those will be the $100,000 homestead exemption, but that's not the issue. It's the prior bonds and making sure the hold harmless is applied to those. So again, we're guesstimating there, and we'll have to verify it with their models when they come out, but I'm sure they're working through it diligently to try and get it updated as well.
Jennifer, can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
So what's the implication for us as a school district if TEA is going to make us whole, quote whole? What's the implication for us as a school district planning moving forward?
So it just becomes a little bit more complicated in our models that we have to have a separate column in there for the hold harmless payment. Almost like districts that receive state aid or
right.
EDA, there's a separate column for the state assistance. It's really kind of a state assistance column that gets added in and projected going forward. And this one we have a better idea of how to project it going forward because it's not based on WADA.
Right.
So we'll know what it is, and eventually it'll go away because all those old bonds will have paid off. But it's just a separate column of revenue that essentially goes into the model.
Okay. But that's really for the predictive phase that we're in right now. When we get that final word from TEA, what that is, we'll be better off.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And they haven't said when that should be, but there are districts that are planning to sell now, and kind of everyone needs it, right? So I would anticipate it's something they're working on diligently. It is a lot of work for them as well.
Okay.
So additionally, one other kind of twist on this is that in prior years, we mentioned there's this 50-cent test. Again, you're under 40 cents at 39.5 pennies, we'll call it. So you're nowhere near the 50-cent test, but the Attorney General has not allowed us to use the hold harmless payments to pass the 50-cent test. So essentially, you may recall, the board members who've been around for a while, sometimes we'll have an election and I will say, well, your max capacity under the 50-cent test is such and such dollar amount, and then when you look at my spreadsheets, it shows a maximum tax rate of 47 cents. It's never 50.
Right.
And that's because the AG is not allowing us to use all the different revenue sources, including even frozen collections.
Right.
We aren't allowed to use frozen collections in the model either. So the AG test is, quite frankly, antiquated and penalizes districts to sort of artificially hold that rate below 50 cents. I don't think it's intended that way. I think it's just they haven't updated it, quite frankly, and probably have other stuff they're worried about at the AG's office. But in terms of what it means for us, if they don't allow Belton to use that hold harmless payment, which we're projecting to be close to $4 million per year in amount of money that should be coming from the state, then there's no way that we can sell a lot of bonds because we start bumping into the 50-cent test, not just our whole, we know the 39.42 cents, which you're currently at, we can hold that because we will be getting that money, but we can't necessarily pass the 50-cent test without showing that. So when we were doing our modeling, what we were running into was hitting the 50-cent test, not the 39.42 cent max cap. The AG has not said yet that they're going to let, there's obviously a lot of movement to try and allow districts to use that since it has become such a large number. He hasn't weighed in yet. We expect that to be imminent because there are districts who are now selling after the election passed to raise the homestead. So I think we'll have that answer very soon. So, but that is another factor in that we're not allowed to use that at the moment on our capacity. Your capacity will go up if we're able to use that. But this one we hope will be clarified, I would assume, by the end of the year. I'm not sure who the test case district is, but there's got to be somebody out there. There's got to be somebody out there. Because you've got capacity. Think about the districts that are at 48 cents, right? I mean, they're in a lot of trouble. So just kind of a reminder here, I know you're potentially talking about November of 24. Last day to call for November of 24 is August 19th of 24. even though it sounds like a long way, I'm sure it'll be here before we know it. And May is shockingly only, basically 3 months away to call a May election for anybody considering that. I think a lot of districts are shying away from November, just given the sort of general political implications of what will be on the ballot in November, but it might be a good time to go because there should be a large turnout. And as a reminder as well, it doesn't really fit on this slide, but athletic facilities, which I know are the sort of crux of the conversation here tonight, those are all separated out from school buildings and educational purposes. Technology is also separated out. A couple other things are, so athletic facilities themselves have to be voted as a separate proposition. And depending on the number of different athletic facilities that you're doing, you might have a couple of them on the ballot. So some might pass, some might not pass. This is kind of, unfortunately, we can't do that one bond proposition and have it either pass or fail. One other note here, and I think this is maybe second to last. To be able to get to these assumptions in terms of how much you can afford, every time the tax base grows, which in Belton it grows every year, if we're not issuing new debt, there's this natural pressure on the INS tax rate to fall because values are increasing and we're not issuing new debt. Which is a nice thing to have a lower tax rate, but a little bit difficult when we're anticipating calling a bond election the next year because we may have to lower it by a couple of pennies and then come back, and instead of raising it by, or holding it flat, we're now in a position where it's being raised by the same amount that you gave up or even maybe a little bit more. So to avoid doing that, should you want to, you can legally hold the INS tax rate steady by prepaying bonds in years when there's no new bonds being sold. In this analysis, we have assumed holding in the next fiscal year the 39.4 cent INS tax rate by prepaying almost $5.5 million of existing bonds. And that will actually save interest. We're just paying it off entirely. It's not a refunding. It's just purely being paid off. The $5.5 million currently would be saving you a little bit over $10 million in debt service over the life of the issue. So that helps capacity as well.
Right.
So every time that we can, pay off bonds early and save taxpayers debt service, that's a nice thing to do without having to raise the tax rate. So that is in this model as well. So something to think about next summer when you set your tax rate. And then again, because we are far out, interest rates are not predictable at the moment. It's a moving target, so the number that we're talking about tonight, even more so because of what's happening with the new homestead exemption is going to be different for certain than what we ultimately come back with. So our job is to give you a number that we feel confident. I think these numbers we're confident we can do this much. Hopefully we can do more. I think it certainly could be higher depending on where the AG falls out with that 50-cent test question as well. So they're conservative to account for a couple of different factors here. So I don't want y'all to think, well, Jennifer told us the number is between 51 million and 64 million, that's all we can get. If you really need 75 million, let us know what you're thinking, and if there's a way to get there, we can always phase it if we needed to, but there may be between now and then something creative that can happen, or quite frankly, we just get more guidance from TEA and the AG's office that makes this more clear. So don't limit yourselves right now on what you're considering doing. I don't want that to be the focus of the conversation, just to give you some initial feedback on where you are currently today, but again, I think it's probably pretty conservative. So happy to answer any questions. Again, thanks for having us out.
If rates were to drop next year with the presidential election, let's say they dropped 0.25 early on and another 0.25 in the summer, what would that do for us in terms of our debt capacity?
So the debt capacity doesn't move quite as much in terms of interest rates as it would with the tax base growth, but it would help for sure. I mean, I can't give you probably a couple $1 million bucks is how much it would help.
Yeah, so what would be the biggest factor in increasing debt capacity?
The tax base growth.
Tax base growth.
So again, if we're at 7.5% next year, followed by 5%, and you come in at 10% and 7.5%, something like that, that would be a bigger number. It's probably in the $5 to $10 million range in terms of capacity. And then as well, that allows us to pay off more existing bonds to hold the INS rate. The more existing bonds we pay off, the more capacity we have for new bonds as well. So all of that increased value kind of cycles through and increases the capacity.
I think a couple of things to point out real quickly too in our conversations with Jennifer before this presentation and getting her to come here, we wanted to be conservative, We just threw out November of '24. Obviously, we're not coming to you with a recommendation. If the board wants to pursue something in February of '24, or excuse me, May of '24, or the following year, whatever it is, we just needed a date to start to do some models from. So that's what the purpose of that was. But Jennifer's conservative base here is important, and this is with no increase in the tax rate. So obviously, if you raise the tax rate a penny, another penny, whatever it was to get us up to closer to that 50-cent test, there would be more capacity as well.
That's right, yeah. That's a good point.
And so I think her point, you know, when she said, don't limit yourself to 51 to 64 million, because if you increase the tax rate 3 pennies and all of that, you could be adding significant amount in that capacity as well.
And to your point as well, because this assumes no tax rate increase, the next question usually comes up of, well, what does that mean in terms of 3 or 4 years down the road? We need a new elementary school, whatever the case may be. And because we still have approximately 10.5 pennies of capacity, you're never, if you're holding the INS tax rate, you're never limiting yourself to not being able to do anything in the future. It may involve a tax increase, it might not, if we're too conservative, but nonetheless, you do still have capacity going forward after this.
What number do you suggest, and I know this is a moving target, but when you're advising school districts, and it'd be fast growth like us, I'm not going to compare us to somebody who's not having growth, it's a totally different situation, they're in their own box. But for fast growth, you know, we've been hanging around that 39, we bumped up to 43 at one point, and we've been hanging around that 39 consistently, 38 to 39. Where do y'all like to see districts in that reference to?
I feel like that's a loaded question.
Nah, it's not loaded. But y'all advise people all the time. I mean, I've seen districts that are all the way to 47, and I'm just in my heart going, oh my goodness, I don't know how you sleep at night.
There were some that held it at 50 as
Yeah.
long as they could, because
Right
you
down
know
the road.
something was coming, and you know, they didn't really have a choice. And I think especially with what's happened in compression on the M&O side, you know, people are getting relief either way.
Right?
So, you know, I'm not going to say that you should raise it. I think 39 is a good spot for you all, but if you needed to go up a little bit, I wouldn't really want to go above 45, quite frankly. But I do think, but again, that gets into what, you know, the community supports ultimately. So, I mean, anything less than 45, I'd probably be comfortable because you still have capacity for emergency projects or, you know, something else. But y'all did a good job of keeping it where it is and paying down debt as quickly as you can when the opportunity avails itself.
Right.
Which also factors into the AA minus rating.
You talked about waiting for something from TEA with the formulas. Do you know when that may be coming? And what will that help?
Well, so we'll have a hard number for what your hold harmless payment is.
Okay.
We're estimating it based on going through all the bond issues and saying, you know, this was passed in 2002, you know, I mean, because it goes all, in your case, it goes back 28 years on your existing debt. So we've gone through and tried to match it to each outstanding bond series, but TA will do their own, and, you know, we're not going to ever, even now, we don't 100% match them. Like I said, in some cases, they're higher than what we're showing. So we just need them to essentially say what that number is, because what they say is what it is. So even if they're not, if we think there's an issue, unless we can point out that it's a big issue, what they say goes, because they're the ones writing the checks. So that should be imminent, because again, everyone's relying upon that. Particularly, I think sort of a worst case would be sometime this summer, since the state's fiscal year starts again at the same time as yours. So, you know, in that case, there really is no fallback, but I would anticipate that to be in the next month or it should be soon. They've had time since I think that was put on the ballot in August or something. They've had time to start working on it. It's just a lot to work on.
But
We
it's
checked
not,
again Monday, and it's still not updated.
But it's not newfound money. It's a hold harmless means. It's just making us whole back to where we were prior to.
That's right. It's not new money.
It's not new money at all. I mean,
That's
yes,
exactly
we
right.
get money, but it's money that was already, we've had it before.
That's
It
right.
went away and it's just coming back.
It's sort of the kind of way I would look at it is it's compensating you for the fact that you took a hit in
Right.
terms of your valuation from the.
Yeah.
the
So it just brings us back to
100,000.
where we were.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the idea. Now again, the new one will be at $100,000, so it's kind of difficult to model what that would look like. It will be at a higher homestead exemption, so you know, on a new bond election, a penny in tax rate doesn't generate quite as much as an old bond election, right?
Right.
But, you know, we've factored that in. But you're right, it's not new money. It's old money.
Any other questions for Jennifer?
It was always so exciting when we talk about debt, everyone's favorite subject. So we'll keep updating this and keep an eye on the TEA models, and then as soon as we get any guidance from the AG's office as well, we'll update you and update all of these numbers and kind of have it be a conversation to assist in your planning for whatever you'll ultimately decide to do.
Jennifer, thank you for being here
Thank
tonight.
you. Thank
We appreciate you. So Jennifer, obviously, as we continue to explore options, this is one of the first things y'all said last time we met, that you wanted to start to get a sense of where we were capacity-wise and what that would look like for the future. So thank you for helping us with that. And as we continue to explore these options, we'll obviously be talking with Jennifer more.
Yeah, I guess I would say as well that I think the last time when we passed the bond election, we essentially had no 2021.
22.
22, okay.
Yep.
We had no capacity without a tax increase, and so even in a year, it's immediately grown, right, to 60 million, just by conservatism and growth within the tax base. So if you were talking about November potentially or whatever, y'all are considering, just naturally this number will probably grow again. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Travel
it.
safe tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Mr. President, if it's okay, we'd like to recess for a little while so the board can grab some food and we can continue with our workshop while we eat.
All right, we're recessed at 5:27 p.m.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now back on the record. It is now 5:40 p.m. Dr. Smith?
So board, a couple of other things that we needed to follow up on based on our last meeting were, what do we need? What is it that we really need? What kind of capacity do we have? And I think the other question was, what is the public appetite for something like this? And so we're going to start to really dive into what do we need first. The public appetite is a different conversation we'll have a little bit later, and we'll talk a little bit about partnerships in the public appetite for that as well tonight. And we'll talk about some next steps, but we'll turn it over to Mike. And y'all know Steve Berry, obviously. Want to thank, y'all know Brian, Ty, and Sean, who athletic facilities, and Jeremy's been a good supporter of athletics along the way, and so he's here as well tonight, and our other staff. And so we'll engage whomever in conversation for whatever we need tonight, but we'll turn it over to Mike and Steve to start to talk about what we need and how we got there.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Smith, and thanks, board, for being here tonight. We are going to kind of expand on the discussion that we started at our workshop last month, and there was a small portion of that meeting where we did mention athletic facilities and asked for y'all kind of what are some things you need more information on. So we're going to spend some time tonight. The first portion of the workshop will be just kind of a review of the last year and a half or so of work that's gone into some discussions around athletic facilities. We'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into, I think one of the questions from the other night was, kind of what is our current state? Where are we right now? What are some of the needs that have been identified, and how did we identify those needs? And then we will take some time. We're going to ask you to provide us some input, and we'll talk a little more about that as we get to that portion. And as Matt said, we'll have a couple of discussion questions, and we'll end the night with a brief discussion of campus modernization, capital renewal, kind of a little bit deeper dive into what that means and what some of the following information that we'll be bringing to y'all in our long-range plan would be. So tonight we want to talk about those things. If this is an area that was covered in the last workshop, or an area that we feel like we've given you pretty extensive information in, I'll probably go fairly quickly. If it's an area where we need to slow down, number one, we may slow the tempo down. Number two, if you want to stop and ask questions and have some discussion, that's the way this is designed. So I don't want to belabor some of the things that we've already spent some time on as a group in workshop, but at the same time, is at any point in time we can stop and we can have a deeper discussion. And that's why we've asked Steve and Sam and Keith to be up here with us tonight as well, because they will have some of the context that has gone into these discussions that's included in this presentation. So what's our current reality? As we discussed, we have one stadium where we host all of our 5A and 6A events, football events, Friday night events, and that facility is in need of some major capital repairs and some capital improvements. Lake Belton High School is our newest high school. They do have an athletic facility at that school, but it's a single-use facility that was not designed for varsity football. Some of the reasons and some of the facts about Bronco Field, opened in 2020. Total seating capacity is a little under 2,000. Seating is only on the home side. And some of the things that drive that discussion around why is it not able to host a varsity football game, capacity drives your number of parking spots, your number of restrooms, and your concession areas. And so you'll see a little bit later kind of what we've been needing from a capacity standpoint at Lake Belton events, and it far exceeds this number of 2,000. And I'll show you that information here in a little bit. Belton High School we have a facility at Belton High School named Tiger Field. It's a shared use facility for varsity football, and all of our varsity football games for Lake Belton High School and Belton High School are hosted there. It does have a capacity of over 7,000. The turf and track were replaced in 2015, and as I mentioned earlier, we are in need of some pretty significant capital improvements at that facility. And one of the things that we're not able to do that we would like to do at our facility is host large 5A, 6A marching contests, either at the invitational level, the UIL area, or even the regional level as well. And so we can dig a little deeper into that later in the presentation. What does that mean?
Hey, Mike, the turf has got what, a 10-year life on it?
Usually 8 to 12.
Okay.
So we are closing in quickly on 8, and so you can tell just from the type of fading and some of the things, but you're generally, and Sam might can speak a little more to the specific brand of turf we have. I've always been told 8 to 12, but 12 is going to be the dead end of the life. 8, you usually start seeing the wear that would need to start looking at replacement.
Turf companies want to say 8. You get 10, 12, you start pushing it.
Yeah, no, that's good enough.
Are grass fields even used much anymore in high school football?
Not much. Not above the 1A or 2A levels primarily. This is a chart, and this is when you hear things like, and you're going to see some feedback we received from our long-range facilities planning team and focus group, and it's going to talk about some of the amenities in the site. One of the biggest things that's going to come to life is where because of the facility is housed at Belton High School, we don't have great accommodations, number one, for the visiting teams, regardless of who's playing their home game, the visiting teams. And then also we felt when Lake Belton began to play varsity football games here, we felt like it was important that they have their own dressing room, that they don't share. The question is asked sometimes, well, why don't they just dress at Belton's dressing room? You'll remember, typically Belton if Lake Belton's at home, Belton High's on a road game. So those kids have all of their clothes, their wallets, their keys, all of their stuff are in that locker room. So not only would it not feel like, it would even feel like less like a home locker room to Lake Belton. There's functionality of that is that Belton Fieldhouse is a live operation on Friday nights. They just happen to all be on the bus on the road playing a game, and they'll be back at some point to get all their things and put all their things away. Because those locker rooms are outside of the fenced-in portion of the facility, there are some issues with getting those teams to and from the stadium before the game, for pregame, at halftime, and then back to their locker rooms after the game. There's also a challenge of visitors buses park. The visitors band buses park down here on Tiger Drive, and they bring all of their equipment up this sidewalk and onto this entrance or up into the stands as well. So there's really from the home, Belton High School home is a pretty easy entrance onto the field. Lake Belton Band parks their vehicles here on this ambulance drive or the fire drive behind, and they load their things into this band area as well. But we want to talk about, and when we're going to find out what our feedback was, wanted to make sure you had eyes on the layout of the facility and some of the challenges that presents whenever we have a big event on a Friday night. I won't spend much time with these. We've taken some groups on some tours, and that's how we got to some of the feedback. These are just some of where our ADA seating is at the bottom row here at Tiger Field. Here's the Lake Belton locker room, and it is a facility that only Lake Belton uses that, but it's some repurposed locker rooms from the old field house that baseball and our soccer programs at Belton High School currently use. Just some things, the home concession area, visitor dressing room, press box, has been fresh coat of paint, has had some minor remodeling, but it's very limited because of the size and the functionality of the design. I think these pictures are a pretty good show. Here's kind of what that under the stand, when you look at the restroom and concession area, kind of typically looks like on a Friday night. And here's what we typically draw pretty good crowds. And here's kind of what that bleacher section looks like. Remember, the ADA seating is down here in front, which is also where people come and leave. They go to their seats. They come down. They go to concessions. Those sorts of things. Some infrastructure needs, typical things on some of the sidewalks, parking lot areas. We've had some challenges keeping the video board up and running, but kind of like the turf, that video board is towards the end of its expected life. So these aren't things that's not something that's necessarily a surprise to us. So
a couple things to add real quickly. We did a focus group about a year and a half ago with some parents of students with special needs in our system. And they specifically pointed out that they would like to be involved in things at Tiger Field on Friday nights and have a Friday night light experience. But restroom accommodations, seating accommodations, and just access to the stadium itself is not conducive to that for their families. And if you think about that, walk into the stadium from the parking lot, our patrons that are in any way, shape, or form physically challenged due to age and mobility, whatever it might be, it is a difficult situation. So we have some significant ADA things that we need to talk about with this field. It is not meeting our needs right now.
some of the things that have been identified to get to Bronco Field to host Friday night football, really the big three is the bleachers capacity that you would need, the existing restroom and concession areas that would be needed, not only to accommodate a 5,000 to 6,000 to 7,000 person crowd, but also to meet code and meet the minimum requirements there as well, and to replace the press box. That press box was not designed that would accommodate all of the two coaching staffs, all the different film crew, radio, all the workers, media, and all those sorts of things as well. So what is our current reality at the swim center? That's the other athletic facility that's been a focus of a lot of our discussion. We have an auditorium. We're blessed to have an auditorium, and it has supported this community well to establish some very strong swim programs, a strong club program, and strong community partnerships. It is an aging facility with a finite lifespan and significant space limitations to support the programs we would like to support. It's a steel framed double membrane facility that has some limitations that I think we've covered before. For instance, if there's high winds or lightning, we shut the facility down. Any type of severe weather, we don't keep kids or patrons in that facility. It only has seating for about 236 spectators. I know we hosted a very large swim meet 2 weekends ago, and we're really challenged for seating and spectator seating whenever we host a big event. And then it is also, with it only being a 25-meter pool and only being 8 lanes, it has severely limited what we can do as far as participation and just how many kids we can get in the pool or how many adults we can get in the pool at a time. Just some pictures of that area. You'll see some of the things that rose to the level of need here in a little bit later in the presentation. So, focus groups and long-range facility planning team. I'm going to hit the highlights of this section. We dug into this a little bit last month at the facilities. We looked at these timelines. I will say, just to reiterate, This discussion started back in the fall of 2021 when we had our Community Bond Exploration Committee together, and it's continued all the way up until tonight. So this is a conversation of work, of input, and that's been going on for close to 2 years now. And the natatorium, similar timeline. The biggest difference is we had one fewer meeting of our focus group for the natatorium, but everything else has kind of ran a parallel timeline. Once again, this was one of the things that was discussed by our Bond Exploration Committee. It was one of the things that did not make it into the final bond package. This was something that our long-range facility planning team has spent fairly significant 3 different meetings. We've done work around this. With the last being this fall, we did a briefing of the results of the economic impact assessment done by the Perryman Group and made sure that that didn't impact what their final recommendations were. So the focus group input, we asked them, they've toured the facility, they've toured other facilities, they've seen everything that you saw in the pictures, everything we've talked about, and we asked them to prioritize what they thought that the greatest needs were at Tiger Field. And as Matt said, accessibility improvements from parking lot to press box to bleachers are not ideal to host big events. They're really not. For a Thursday night event that might have 300 spectators there, adequate. For a Friday night event that has 6,000 people there, we have some real challenges there. They also thought that the locker room situation, the accommodations, the location, and the safety were some things that they really were concerned about. And then just lighting throughout the facility. Field lighting under the concourse, in the parking lot areas, and then you can see the rest. But those were really the top 3 that were concerns to our focus group. We also asked them to go through an exercise where they discussed campus stadiums versus shared use stadiums, kind of pros and cons, and you can see what some of the thoughts in that room were. So to go with the campus stadium approach, which would mean a solution that we have an option, a Friday night option at Belton High and a Friday night option at Lake Belton High, you can see some of the things that they felt like the biggest pros, the biggest advantages of going with that model, and what some of the disadvantages would be. And to hit highlights is, and I think Matt mentioned this, has mentioned this before too, just from a convenience standpoint, it would be great to, as a campus administrator, a campus band director, or a campus football coach, to have your own facility at your campus. It's a lot less things to go through on a Friday night. I think one of the things that we've spent a lot of time talking about as a focus group and as a long-range facilities planning team is that if you opt to go with a solution that includes campus stadiums, as you add high schools, you probably end up adding more stadiums at that point as well. Then the shared use facility, some pros and cons of that as well. I hit the highlights. A shared use, all campuses have the same facility at that point. Everybody has the same use. And then some of the, you do have potentially have the ability to host larger events since you're only doing one stadium to that degree. And then something over on the other side that they talked about is some of the initial costs might be a little bit higher. And then some of your, every game for every school is a travel if it's at a neutral site. So those were some of the major talking points of that group. In a few minutes, we're going to ask you to give us some input, and it's going to be the same input that our focus group and our long-range facility planning team did, and that is off of a good, better, best scoping exercise. And so whenever we get to that, Steve will spend a little more time talking about that. But we do have some baseline data. We want to add add to that with an activity that we want you guys to do with us in a few minutes. For our natatorium, we went through, our focus group went through a really similar exercise. They toured our facility. They toured other districts' facilities. They came back and said if we were going to prioritize the needs, and if we didn't have needs, we wouldn't be having the discussion. The number one thing was more pool space. The number two thing was separate restroom areas. So our current facility has one set of restrooms and locker rooms that the athletes, the coaches, the officials, and the spectators all use the same facility, even on meet days. And then the third thing was more spectator seating. We would love to host big events. It's hard to do that when you can only accommodate 236 spectators at a time. And so for the natatorium solutions, we talked about several different solutions. The two that rose to the top was wanting to expand to a 50-meter facility. We'll get to recommendations later, but one of those would be a 50-meter practice facility that may be able to solve our pool space issue, potentially not be able to host the big events we would like to. A second option was to have that same 50-meter pool space, but also accommodate that with a full competition facility where we can host big events, big meets, big club meets, district events, maybe UIL regional events, those sorts of things. And so I went through all of that very quickly. I'll stop and take a breath for a second. And while we have folks in the room that have really been digging into this, do we have any questions or discussion points just out of our current conditions portion of the presentation?
Can you explain more what a finite lifespan, what does that mean with the natatorium?
There is a point in time where that facility will run its course. It could come due to, we've replaced the outer membrane once. It could come down to a discontinuation of that product that we can no longer get membranes to replace. It could come down to a really big bit of severe weather that facility doesn't hold up under, and so which could happen or couldn't happen. You can't predict. It could be that we have the equipment that's in that facility, from the pumps and the boilers and those sorts of things, they're closing in on 20 years old now. So at some point, can we not get the parts that we would need to replace the equipment just to sustain the pools and things as well? I didn't point out too that with it being located on Belton ISD campus, there's only 38 designated parking spots for that facility as well. So as we have middle school practice right at the end of the school day, club practice is starting up, just at dismissal time and things like that, there's really a challenge to get people in and out of that facility as Belton High School dismisses and have events there as well. So.
And it's also open to the community during the school day, so you have community that open swim, water aerobics, people coming on Belton High campus at the same time. And it is an outdoor pool that's in a bubble. Most indoor pools are not outdoor pools in a bubble, and so that does cause some issues with air quality and et cetera.
One thing I'll note too on this, and that's anytime we have severe weather, you remember last spring we had a roof ripped off of a portable on the Belton High School campus, and that severe weather that came through. Whenever we have that, we worry about what that bubble looks like as well, because that's not designed to stand up to some pretty severe weather. We know safety-wise, when we have severe weather, we have to evacuate people from that facility as well. So when Mike says, a good bit of severe weather, I just need to point out, it's not like it's even a regular building and we're worried about a tornado. Like we're just worried about really high winds, just being honest on this one. This is not a structure that's designed to withstand some real significant stuff.
I think it might be wise we spent a great deal of time with our long-range facility planning team and our focus group talking about limitations on our current facility to host large-scale band competitions. And while we have Keith here, I might like for him to talk about what not only are schools interested in, but what do you need from a perspective of warm-up areas, judging areas, things like that. So if that's okay, I'd like for Keith to kind of tell us what you really need to be able to host those kinds of events.
Sure. So, thank you, Mike. For a stadium to be able to host what we would consider 4A, 5A, 6A level bands coming in, the number one thing is parking. Because as Chris found out this year in being the person that pushes the props around, when you're bringing in 4A, 5A, 6A school districts, you're talking 6, 7, 8 buses, a couple of semis, or at least a semi and a trailer or two, and just the amount of parking that they need, plus your spectator parking. Once you get a competition up and running, you could probably 5,000 to 6,000 tickets sold, so you need parking for 5,000 to 6,000 spectators, plus all the parking for your bands. On top of that, so that's just dealing with the parking. Also on the outside of the stadium would be warm-up area. You have to have enough room for a band to warm up far enough away from the stadium that you don't have to bleed over, sound bleeding over into the stadium. On the inside of the stadium, of course, enough seating to hold 5,000 or 6,000 spectators. They're not all there at the same time as bands perform. It depends on what kind of competition you're having. So if you're doing a regular region marching contest, that's our first UIL marching contest. It's a one and done. So the bands come in, they perform, they get their rating, they go home. At the area level, we usually have finals. So let's say there's 25 bands at the area level. They're not all there at the same time, but once you get into the finals, you usually have 10 bands in the finals. Most of your spectators are there to watch all of the bands, if that makes any sense. Okay. So parking, seating for that number of people. As far as the press box, you would need a large enough area for judges to be able to have a clear line of sight and sound. And in our current press box, you have maybe the clear line of sight, but not sound. My first year here, we hosted a 3A area marching contest, and we had to have the music judges sitting in front of the press box because the windows do not open up properly to get a good sound entering in the press box. And so you're looking at, I hate to call it a film deck, but that's wide enough to have 5 judges, or a double stacked film deck, large enough for 5 judges. And you don't, today's judging, you're basically, as the band's performing, you're making vocal comments on, and they're being recorded. And you can't have the judge too close together because then I'm picking up on what Rucker's saying, Rucker's picking up on what I'm saying, and you don't get that clear recording for the dance to listen.
Are there any, I think I brushed through natatorium things fairly quickly too. We've spent some time on it. You may feel well informed. Is there any other questions about just current state of natatorium? And we'll go through some program numbers in a second just to make sure you know kind of what participation we have, what our limitations are. But as far as just current state of the facility, do y'all feel good about that? Okay. Yes.
It doesn't necessarily be now, but we got the coaches in the room. We got Coach Kidmore here. I'd like to hear from them also. I don't have a specific question, but I'd like to hear what's on their mind and what their thoughts are about all the work that you guys have done to report to us. Because we're talking about football fields, athletic facilities. So, and you said we could talk to them.
Let's do it.
So
Is this the time?
yeah.
Do you want? Let me go through the rest of the data and information because it may answer some questions that you may ask them, and then that way they can fill in gaps or answer specific questions that we may not be able to. Is that okay with everyone?
Sure.
So just some stadium data that from our 2 programs, our football, all the things included in that: players, trainers, filmers, managers, fine arts, band, colored guard, dance, CTE, and cheer. We have over 2,500 students involved in those programs. Secondary, that represents about 35% of our secondary students. So I would say that from a students and a family standpoint and a community standpoint, when you are talking about things that involve stadiums, it involves a lot of kids and a lot of families in our community. This is one this is information that Sam helped compile and Keith helped compile. But we looked at the last 2 years for Belton High, the last 2 years for Lake Belton High varsity football. We took some of the regional hot spots for playoffs, Hutto and Pflugerville, because of their location and because of their facility. They host a lot of playoff games. We didn't ask them to break it down by classification because we would, our ability to host events, we would host any size events, 2A schools, 6A schools. And then we looked at a 25 band invitational. We looked at a 25 band area, and we looked at a 25 band regional competition. They're all of the same size as our schools, and you can just kind of see what the average attendance needs or capacity needs. And so the way when we say capacity need, that is all of the seats you would need for everybody that bought a ticket, all of the seats you would need for everybody that came in with the pass, and all of the seats you would need for everybody that's in the dance, the drill teams and the bands and things like that. So I won't say that we've sold 4,000 tickets for every BHS game. I'll say we need 4,000 seats for every BHS game. So this kind of shows you where we've been over the last 2 years. We're right around 4,000 per game for Belton High. We're right around between 45 and 5,000 for Lake Belton High. We are right around that 4,800 or so mark for is what Hutto and Pflugerville hosted for capacity needs, and then the band competitions that were like the ones we would like to are a little over 6,000. I will say some of this is dependent upon who you play as well. We have not consistently drawn large visiting crowds. Depending on what district you're in and who your district opponents are or who your non-district opponents are will influence this a little bit as well. So some natatorium programming things, right? I think we have shown y'all this briefly before. We do have some capped programs just because of practice time availability and pool space availability. So right now we are seeing, counting our summer swim, about 723. You have to remember though, the majority of these are there daily. So these 230 and these 150, so about this 280, 340 or so, they're coming every day. And our club swimmers and our Sean and them can speak to this later. They're there most of the year. So whenever there's not like a short club season. The UIL season's fairly short. The club season's a year-round season for these guys. An expanded, here are just some base numbers on what an expanded facility could look like. We anticipate that we could round our club up to around 400 or so. You could start providing year-round swim lessons. And the next thing is maybe these are some things that we would like to look at with an expanded facility. You can see some of the possibilities there. Year-round swim, second grade. A lot of districts that have the larger facility, they incorporate some type of elementary water safety course for all their elementary kids. Water polo, which is UIL, and there could be some club possibilities with that. Diving, which is UIL and club. We currently don't have a facility to incorporate that. Some of the other things that we've seen other districts do with the larger facility: community scuba, lifeguard classes, physical therapy in a water-based setting, special education water therapy as part of our in-school services, Special Olympic swimming, adult swim lessons, and then CTE opportunities, things like sea perch and things like that. So those are the types of things that if we were not limited by lane space and pool space, some offerings that would be pursuable depending upon community demand and school interest in providing those programs as well.
For those of you that don't know sea perch, Melinda will tell you briefly what that is.
Oh, good. I was about to look at that.
I'm super excited about that. That is an opportunity for elementary, middle, and high school students, and it's underwater robotics programs. So, yeah.
It's pretty cool. One other thing I'll say real quickly on the like Special Olympics swimming, and keep in mind Special Olympics facilities. It'd be nice to actually host Special Olympics regional meets in one of our stadiums, whatever stadium solution we come up with in the future. It would be nice to be the district that does that, and that's willing to do that and host that for Central Texas.
one of the things that we spent time with our focus group was talking about what do other districts do? They're like us. What do other districts do that are our size? So Coach Skidmore and his staff, he worked through a lot of AD connections and looked at some statewide data. They polled and looked at our service. There were 501 5A and 6A high schools in Texas, and 402 of those are part of multi-school districts. So we focused on, like us, we're a multi-school district with 5A and 6A high schools. And of those 402, 92.3% have some variation of a shared use stadiums. It may be on campus, it may be in a neutral site, but they are shared use, and multiple high schools use that facility. 31 of those schools out of those 402 utilize campus stadiums, meaning it's single-use stadiums, one campus, one stadium per use. And then we also looked at, or Sam and his team also looked at, what are the 2 and 3 high school districts in Texas doing as well? So if they have, regardless of classification per se, if they only have 2 or 3 high schools, 93, about the same percentages, 93.9% of those utilize some sort of district or shared use facility. 3 of the districts utilize the campus stadiums. And then we also looked at a trend, and we wanted to just bring this data and have it available so as the discussion dictates. There's been a trend that as school districts have built new athletic facilities, they have found ways to incorporate as part of the design community and professional development rooms or centers in that design. And so we just thought it would be interesting to look at, of the 2 and 3 high school districts who have incorporated community and PD facilities at their offsite shared use facilities, 32% have, 68% have not. And I think what we found, and Sam, correct me if I'm wrong on this, is most of the districts that have been the more recent design. So it's a more recent trend. Last decade or so, you're going to see a lot more community rooms. Prior to that, you're going to see fewer community rooms. Does that hold true?
Yeah, and most of those are new builds. The ones that are no were mostly renovations of current facilities.
I know Midlothian was one of the stadiums we toured, and it was one that I think the originally opened in like 2006 or somewhere around in there. It originally didn't have a community room, but when they went back and renovated and added on, they added a community room. So that would be an example of a more modern, an update, a renovation that included that. So really, as we're not to a point tonight that we're going to bring forward these are the solutions and we're ready to choose one, but as a vision, these are the conversations that we've been having with our parents, with our staff, with our focus group at our facility, is that whatever ends up happening with the stadium, these are the things that kind of where our vision lands on this. As equitable and safe facility, and by equitable meaning that's equitable for all the students that are going to be using it from whichever school they're from. An ability to accommodate all of our varsity football events. The ability to host 5A and 6A marching competitions at the invitational area and regional level. To take advantage, we are in a favorable location, and if we have, and we host playoff games, we'll host playoff games every year that we can. But we're in a favorable location. We would want to host a lot of events in a facility, and we would want to host a lot of regional events from UIL, regional band, regional soccer, all those sorts of things as well.
So for the third bullet, right, so the ability to host 5 and 6A marching competitions, if we went with the district or with a campus level solution, I mean, just from what I've witnessed over the last year, like I don't know that we could do that, right, Keith? I mean, probably. Like that pretty much takes that bullet off the table if we went campus level solution. Yeah. Okay.
I think most likely that's true. I think we would have to explore other opportunities. An expansion of parking would be, I think, the biggest thing, and then remodeling some facilities. But expansion of parking is probably the biggest limiter in that one.
Yeah.
And from an auditorium standpoint, once again, a reliable and safe facility that provides enhanced experiences, ability to support and expand programming. And we mentioned this prior, but we have 7 campuses that have swim programs, and they all swim in our current auditorium. and the ability, we're unique in a way that we own our own swim club, we run our own swim club, we have a great swim club. We would like to expand that swim club, and just currently we're strapped for space. The ability to also host district, regional, and large club meets year-round, and then the ability to expand our programs and local access, community access to the natatorium needs. Decision points, not that we're asking you to make a decision, but kind of we talked to you the other night about what problem are we trying to solve. So eventually we will get to a point where we will say, do we continue to operate in our current natatorium and operate in the way that we've talked to you about, or do we look at opportunities for a larger facility where we could grow programs? And then from an athletic stadium standpoint, do we continue to operate with the shared use facility? And if we do we develop a plan for campus-based single-use facilities? If we do continue with the shared use facility, where should it be located? Our current one is located at Belton High School. Would it still be located on a campus? Would it be located on a neutral site? And so next steps that we feel like, and we would love some feedback on this, is part of the next exercise we're going to do is to talk about project scope and programming a little bit. So we don't feel like it's a fair conversation for anyone until we have some scoping and programming done to know exactly what we're talking about. To work with construction experts, the people in the field that are building these facilities, and find out some realistic cost estimates. And then gather some, and this is one of the feedback from meeting a couple of weeks ago, go through a process to gather stakeholder and community input for athletic facility solutions to gauge where our community is on this issue, and then to come back and bring back recommendations and make a final decision on what the best solution is and when we need to do it.
So just addressing what our board asked for last time, tonight, closing out the evening, we're going to ask you for some specific input. Your input's going to help us generate some of those cost estimates from construction experts. I also received feedback from a board member that, hey, we want to make sure we don't just focus on architectural estimates, let's use construction estimates. And so we're going to be doing that coming up here, but we need the right scope, and so we're going to be asking you for your input tonight to help us determine the right scope based on the work that Mike has presented to you in the last 2 workshops. After that, we'll be able to have some kind of numbers, and we'll be able to clearly articulate what potential stadium natatorium solutions would be, and we'd be able to actually produce survey opportunities for our community to gather community input. So tonight's a pretty critical step in us determining these next things along the way.
I will very briefly go through recommendations from the long-range facility planning team. Back on March 30th, we presented a very detailed version of this information that we've gone through tonight, and we asked them the same questions that we're going to eventually ask our community, and that is, what would your be preferred choice in a master plan as a stadium solution? They were roughly where the district statewide fall. About 90% said a shared use, about 7% said a campus solution, and about 3.5% said undecided. We also asked them, if we were to decide on a shared use facility, would you rather it be at one of our 2 high schools or at a neutral site? That group that night said that if it was going to be a shared use facility, they would prefer for it to be at a neutral site. And then the other thing we asked was if of the natatorium solutions that were recommended from our focus group, if it came down between a 50-meter competition facility, a 50-meter practice facility, and then there was a 50-meter outdoor facility that was in that as well. 60% said they would prefer the 50-meter competition facility. 39.6% said the 50-meter just practice facility, and no one chose the 50-meter outdoor facility out of that group. So that being said, we really want to, Steve's going to talk a little bit about.
Do you want to get our coaches so they can?
I do want to get our
Yeah.
coaches involved.
Let's make sure they can. Come on up, y'all. You can bring a chair on up, and let's let our board have some conversation with y'all real quick before we dive into stadium scoping exercise.
I apologize for that.
Mike got rolling.
I do get rolling sometimes. So.
So y'all know Sean. Sean runs our natatorium. Y'all know Brian Cope, obviously, Lake Belton High School, and Sam and Keith here. So what kind of questions do you have, Counselor?
No specific question, just more of a general question. What is it that you think that we as a Board of Trustees need to know other than what we've discussed? And I want to know what's on y'all's minds.
So I think that Sam and Ty and Mike have done a great job of trying to make Lake Belton feel like Tiger Field is our home. They've put stuff in the locker rooms to make it. We've put up tents to try to put the horseshoe up there and try to make it feel our own. But there's issues with where our locker room is outside of the facility. If it rains, Coach Skidmore and Coach Patrick have to put together a ramp so that we can cross over the parking lot because it floods where the visitors, where our locker room goes to lead out to. There's also, our Stampede has about 12 band buses now that park in that way. So for us to even get to our entrance, we have to walk on the grass. If it's raining, then we have to walk through band buses and dodge bus mirrors and things like that. And then at the end of games, one of my biggest worries that I have, even to a point that we assign a coach at the end of games to quickly say hi to their families and get back, is where the visitor locker room is and where our locker room is with where the buses are. There could be a situation that could have occurred in a heated game between teams. We beat Killeen this year. We're walking back after we've taken more pictures, as we well know. After the end of the games, we're walking back. Killeen kids are already on the bus, and they're shouting obscenities to our kids right there. It is the only facility that we've played at in the last 2 years in the 5A world where your locker rooms are outside of the stadium confines, and I think that becomes a very big safety issue. We've tried to dress it up by bringing the drum line over and trying to do some stuff. But I think our kids, we don't mind if you build a different stadium because we're already traveling 10 times anyway, and that doesn't bother us. That's not a piece that bothers us at all. I've played at a home stadium before. That's nice, but I think having a really nice stadium where you have an opportunity to go and showcase for your kids and for everybody that they take pride in, along with having band competitions and soccer competitions, I think is really important.
As the head coach, what are you getting in terms of feedback from parents? What do they say?
It's a loaded question.
That was gonna be my question. Yeah.
I think the same thing. I mean, I think when we had the opportunity to play on national TV and it was on Tiger Field, I think that's what created a big debate as well. And I think you want to take pride in the community. One of the things that we talk about in our school is pride, community, and trust. And I think you're trying to build that community and not having a facility, a great shared facility, but having to travel over to that, I think hurts communities getting along as well, because we try to take ownership of it for 5 Fridays, so then we really don't have ownership in it. Even to a point of where to hang different booster signs and where to hang those. You don't want to make sure and step on their toes because it's their facility as well. And I think that there's some frustrations from people.
Do you get people in Lake Belton High School community outside of athletics? Just people who come to games, people who are alumni, or not alumni, but their kids have been there and gone through, or
Yeah.
they're proud of the school. They maybe even move their kids there to play games. Do you get any feedback that if it's not at Lake Belton High School, we don't want it?
No, I don't think that's never been the case. I mean, of course, anybody would like a home facility, but I think they also understand that where does the parking go? Where does the video board? I mean, the scoreboard's just a regular scoreboard. All those different things that get added in, the ambiance of a nice facility. I'm from Houston, so I've played in nice facilities and coached in nice facilities that are shared. And there's a lot more pride. In Cypher ISD, there's a lot of pride in the Berry Center because of how it's been built and what it means to play there. And people play tons of playoff games there because of the facility that they have. And I think people like coming to tour Lake Belton because it's a beautiful facility that has brand new construction and all kinds of things. I think that's the same thing when it comes to building stadiums and playoff games that we would have the opportunity to do.
I mean, I know there's not a single halftime that the team comes back on time because they're making
We try.
That's not a complaint against you, right? No, that's really not a complaint against you, right? I mean, you got to make a quarter-mile walk.
So we've timed it. It takes from our sidelines to our locker room, it takes 5 minutes.
Right.
And so by the time, and you think about, we also talk about an older press box with an elevator that's not real fast. And some of our coaches are bigger, so that takes longer than 5 minutes, as we well know. And so that becomes an issue. So if you think at halftime is typically 24 minutes, maybe 28 minutes, but you're spending 10 minutes just in transition time. So how much time do you have time as a staff to be able to talk through and then be able to get over there, get back up to the elevator for our coaches that are in the press box? Our kids don't have to warm up because the walk's far enough that they're good to go once they start. And normally we're late, so I appreciate that, Chris. No, I know, no.
Hey, look,
and so then we're jogging over there.
It's your
with
stadium,
you.
it's your time. You
Right.
make them wait for
No
you.
doubt.
So I don't have any complaints.
But I think that's I mean,
That's a
there's
perspective
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I appreciate that very much.
so.
Sean, natatorium thoughts?
Well, on the football side, when they have a home game, it ruins everything for us. Like because the locker rooms they use are also the soccer locker rooms, or at least the same entrance. I don't go in there, but like they're stacked up behind the natatorium. Our kids have to move where they park. We have parents trying to come in for swim practice, like to the point where we've previously discussed, do we have to cancel practice when Lake Belton has a home game because they use that side of the field, and we don't want to interrupt what's going on with them. And so then we're at a point where we're saying, hey, the 700 people that use our swim center on a daily basis, do we have to tell them sorry, not today, because there's a home game for a football team, that it's not Belton, right? Because Belton uses the other side, so but on the swim center side, it's we are blessed as we go to our high school teams. We talk like when we're scheduling meets with other high school teams, a lot of them just swim in a community pool or something like that, and they can't have home meets, and so they want to come up here for I get probably 30 emails a year. Can we swim against Belton? Can we swim against Lake Belton? Can we swim against New Tech? And our problem is our answer has to be no a lot of times, because we have a completely strapped facility. We're turning people away. We're literally telling people, you should go swim for the team in Temple because we don't have any space for you. And I don't want to tell a 10-year-old that, hey, I'm sorry, you can't do this sport right now. Maybe later, if we can put you on a wait list, or you can go to another team, because we just don't have a facility large enough to accommodate this many swimmers. If you come during one of our practice times, you look, the pool is action-packed the entire time, and we actually have like one of the coolest dry land facilities, or for the rest of you, you just call it working out space. And we switch back and forth, and we overlap practices to try and accommodate as many people as possible. But things like the locker or like a shared bathroom become just a complete safety issue of adults being in the same bathroom that kids are using, and then the meet that the picture was up there was actually just one of our little 12 and under meet, so it's only about half of our team participates in that, and you saw like the entire stands were action packed, because 100 kids usually come with 200 parents and 400 grandparents, and if you come to one of our meets, you'll see the parking lots full of people just kind of standing around, and we got cars out in the main student parking lot, because we have to like kind of tent city that, because we just don't have the space for those needs. You look at our record board, there's empty spots in the diving spots. There's one, so at one point in time somebody dove for Belton, I don't know how, but there's no records in those spots, because we don't have the ability to have diving, which means our teams score less points when they go to regionals, state, things like that, because they're not able to provide diving. And then we have a kid that drives down to Georgetown to play on a water polo team in Georgetown, or Round Rock, because we don't have the ability to offer those things. And that's the crux of it for us, is we don't have the ability to offer things that we really feel like we should be offering, even if that's just year-round swim lessons. Right around spring break, I start getting probably 10, 20 calls a day. Hey, we want our kid to take swim lessons before we go, or we're Too Late community. we want to take swim lessons. Well, we'll start in the summer because we don't have any space for those swim lessons to be going on. And so those are our issues. And when every once in a while somebody will talk to me about, are we going to put a pool at Lake? And I'm like, I hope not. Not that I don't want a pool at Lake, but like, I mean, the staffing for that, it's like, how are we going to run this? Are we going to run one practice here, one practice? And so, you know, for us, it makes sense, the idea of a shared facility. You know, you're talking about the same amount of money for what you want to do. And if you look at Lake, like they're saying, they don't have any room parking for a football field that already exists. You're going to take up half that parking for a pool and then not have parking for either one of them. Mm-hmm. And so, so yeah, like our issue is we're too big for our home, and we'd like to be able to get bigger because I want every kid in Bell County to know how to swim. I don't want to read an article about a kid drowning in Lake Belton ever again. So,
Sam, Keith, anything to add?
I would say on the natatorium thing, one of my biggest concerns is we are a fast growth school district, and our swim center can no longer grow. Our programs cannot grow, and they're capped. You know, we offer summer swim lessons. He can tell you they sell out like in 2 days, and they're sold out. And we're in a different situation than the teams we swim against. I know we talked about, you know, the Australia team they swim in community pools, but they're heated community pools that we don't have access to anywhere around here. You know, ultimately, we'd love for have year-round swim lessons where kids transition from swim lessons into the pre-team into the club, and they're swimming, and they're getting better in swimming, and it's just that vertical alignment piece. But turning kids away just doesn't sit well with me when we can't provide the simplest of opportunities at the early age to see if it's something they're even interested in, and let them pursue a passion if they become passionate about it. Because swimming is, and I swam till 4th grade, and then it was practice before and after school, and I can't do football and soccer and everything else, and so I made a choice. But not having the opportunity to even have that choice, it worries me. And you know, that place on big meets, there's people all over the place. The club meets are big club meets in the summer. There's 3 days, so there's people staying here for 3 days, swimming in our facility. We're blessed to have the facility we have. There's very few pools in Central Texas that are high school owned that they have the opportunity. Usually it's a community that they have to try to rent space from when they'll let them. So we're blessed to have it, but we are capped in growth, and so that concerns me. And stadium wise, you know, we try to do the best job we can at Tiger Field. It does have its issues, concerns, you know, from a Friday night aspect. Those concerns don't concern me on a Thursday night JV game. The ADA seating doesn't concern me as much because you're talking about 200 people, so someone's not walking in front of you the whole time as you talk to 4,000 people in the stands, and that person sitting there in the ADA seats, they can't even watch the game. And it is hard. We try to do the best job we can for Lake Belton, but it's challenging. And you hear it from the other side. Chris Sniffen couldn't be here tonight because he was working the basketball game. But I also hear that they can't even put the Tiger logo on their own field, you know, and different things like that. And the thing about it, district stadium that I hear when I talk to district schools, and we opened the second high school, and I think we did a fantastic job, because I've heard a lot of school districts that didn't do a good job opening the second high school. And there's a lot of animosity between 2 schools and other school districts. But one thing they told me, the ones that have a district facility, is something that brings both high schools together and our community together as one for a district facility. And that's one thing. It's ours. It's both ours. We're proud of it. It brings us together as one, as a community. So those are kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, just real quick, we do have a lot of interest from UIL in hosting marching band competitions, but it's the smaller classifications because of the parking issue mainly, and also the press box. So would love to be able to meet their request, plus host a pre-UIL competition, because you can generate a lot of funds for your booster programs through that.
I want to ask this question. It might be way off base because it's probably already been covered, but I want to make sure it's clear for everybody. The natatorium that we're discussing, if we were to be able to expand and do this, would also be another location, potentially expanded space, and another piece of property, neutral site for both
I think
schools?
that's definitely a
Okay.
possibility that we would want to consider.
Okay, because I didn't know if we were considering just taking it down and building it back a different way, or like, again, another, like a stadium somewhere else.
Now, we could, I mean, if that's our only option, we also are gonna need to think about long-term, and I use the weather example, but when you're one real bad storm away from having to make a decision on whether you're canceling your swim program forever or not, that's a big deal. So we're, you know, we could rebuild on that site if that's what we had to do, but we would recommend something different than that. To Sean's point on this, we haven't explored multiple pools in depth, and I don't know that that's the right thing for us to do as a community. I think there's a whole lot that's involved in that. I know some districts do that, but it's kind of few and far between. It would be, I think our recommendation on this, if we're gonna do something with a natatorium, it would be a standalone facility in a neutral site.
The operating costs are just so high.
Yeah.
It was one of the things, when the focus groups were going through solutions, and I mean, that's how we build those as a solution, natatorium solutions focus group. And they started with 8 or 9 different options, and one of them was dual pools, and it didn't even make it as high through the discussion as the outdoor pool did. So.
Much discussion about a natatorium and a district facility at the same place?
Potentially.
The thing that's a draw to that is parking,
Right.
sharing parking.
Right.
Because if you build them in 2 separate spots, you have to figure out how to have parking for both spaces, and you're spending a whole lot of money on concrete.
Right.
So definitely some interest in having it on the same
Same location.
Yeah.
Out of a lot of facilities we toured, a lot of them that had a district natatorium and a district stadium, there's quite a few of them on the same location.
I've seen a lot of it in the Berry Center was mentioned earlier. I see a lot of them where you have multiple district facilities on the same site to share parking for that exact reason. So you're cutting down on your long-term costs by putting them all on the same property and shared parking.
Coach, being in Houston, did you have experience with district facilities? Coaching?
Yeah, so I played in one in high school, and I've coached in multiple ones as well.
Okay.
And so, I mean, really enjoyed it because they were really nice facilities. We got to have playoff games there because it was able to hold the crowds. I also think the same thing like what Coach Skidmore said, that it brought the community together, that they took pride in. When I was inside Fair, there wasn't the Berry Center, there was Pridgeon Stadium. That's where the natatorium got built on the backside of it. So once again, they used the facility for the concrete for parking and things like that. We've played over in the Woodlands that had Wood Forest Stadium that had a natatorium right attached where the locker rooms were shared to be able to do those kind of things. And so they were smart with what they were building, and then were able to work together on two really nice facilities that the community took pride in.
You know, go ahead, I'm sorry, Chris. When we do engage the community, as you spoke, I think they need to be told about the economic impact that these decisions could make on our community. And I know that, yeah, the Perryman, talked to Perryman about the Perryman report, and that, I think that needs to be emphasized.
So from a shared stadium point of view, what does that look like from a locker room standpoint? Is that like one home locker room? Is that 2 or 3 home locker rooms? Like what does that look like?
So, like a lot of district stadiums, they'll have 2 locker rooms, a home and a visitor. But for their 2 schools, if they ever were to play each other, they have specific locker rooms that are theirs if they were to play each other. But a lot of the locker rooms are also set up with dividers. So, as districts, their locations might host multiple playoff games in a day. They divide those locker rooms, so one playoff team's in one locker room. The second one can come in, put their stuff down. They don't have to wait for the other one to clear all the way out and get going. But so they have 2 distinct locker rooms. They both have training rooms right there, and it's all right there inside the facility.
So you're potentially looking at like a 4 locker room setup, or?
Well, it's really 2 locker rooms, just
2
the
that are-
ability to divide them if
Okay.
you have to, if you're
Got it.
having back-to-back playoff games. So it's really just 1 locker room, but for a playoff game, you have a divider that you can divide them.
Got it. And then from a like game day experience standpoint, where do you guys want the band?
In the home stand.
Really?
I want to be part of the crowd, close to the student section.
Yeah. Where do you want the band?
That's where we try, like, When we were originally putting all this together, we tried to figure out a way to get them onto the homestands.
Yeah.
But when you're having 4,000 or 5,000 people in a crowd, there's not a great entrance and exit right now for our band on the home side, that it makes sense that they're over in the bandstand.
Yeah.
Back to your locker room deal, the way with 2 high schools, the way Midlothian ISD Stadium is when we went and played at Midlothian last year, we dressed in the Heritage locker room. So it was all Heritage labeled, but the Midlothian side had all their logos and everything there. So it gave them, even though it was a shared stadium, it still gave them a deal. Now, if there is 3 schools, then it's probably not designed that way. But at the time when it's built, when there's 2, then when Heritage plays, then the visiting team dresses in the Midlothian locker room.
Right.
I can tell you about one of my favorite things, honestly, about Friday nights is, honestly, it's a Belton game when the drum line comes over to the student section, right in front of the student section, and right after half, and the drum line starts doing their deal, and the student section gets into it. It just creates so much energy to the stand. So I think the more they're part of our home stands and our student section, the better our overall atmosphere and experience. And the band kids love it.
Yeah.
They get fired up about it, and they're part of it. We were able at the last playoff game, it was raining, we didn't have a big crowd, it was very bad weather with Belton High School, and the Magic Bells were able to go in the home stands because we have plenty of room. And they had a fantastic time being over there, so.
That's how we played in the band when I was in high school.
So interestingly, there's a significant chunk of at least Stampede parents that want the end zone, right? So and we played at a couple games where the band's been up in the end zone.
We did it for a whole year.
Yeah.
Keith, from our band director's perspective, do you have some insight on that?
I think they would much rather be on the home side. You feel like you're a part of the home stands. Your kids are going to get a better experience, and as a director, I would not like being clear across the field. And I have heard several times, well, we hear from the crowd, we hear the band better playing at us. Trust me, with Lake Belton, you're going to hear them wherever they sit.
I know Coach Sniffen couldn't be here, but would you think, based on your conversations, that he would echo the same sentiments and for the same or close to the same reasons?
Absolutely. I mean, I've talked to him in depth. He was part of our focus group, and he went on all our tours. Coach Cope, our band directors, we had band parents, we had football parents, all part of our focus group. And he's coming from districts that had a shared use facility, and he would echo all those sentiments. Yeah, the convenience is nice, being your own, but to have something nice that brings the community together that you're proud of is a whole nother thing.
So Coach, in the different ones that you've been part of, was there one that you had a district stadium that was actually housed at one of their high schools? Or were they all separate locations?
My first job was at Spring High, and we had a campus Leonard George Stadium was on Spring High's campus. And Westfield is a predominant program. They dressed in the freshman locker room. And so we had to get all the freshman stuff out of there. Decaney, when they opened as the 3rd high school, they had to dress in the JV locker room, so we had to get everybody out of there. And I can remember it was enjoyable to have a home game just because you knew you didn't have to clean everything up and you're able to have your facility, but it wasn't a great situation that way. Everything else has been neutral site locations.
Okay.
We're gonna have to move on here so we don't end up here till midnight. Any other questions with our coaches? All right.
Thank
Let's
y'all.
rock
So
and roll.
now we're going to find out.
Do we need a break for a minute, or are you good to
we
keep
good?
going?
I'm gonna keep going.
Okay, let's go.
All right, we're going to kick it over to Steve Barry, and we're going to get some feedback from you guys on Stadium Solutions.
Super, Mike.
Thank you all
very much.
Appreciate it.
Sure. All right, when we were working with the state, when we were working with the stadium focus group, and then when we brought their report back to the long range facility committee, the idea of costing out different solutions for the stadium issue was something that had been kind of talked about in general, and it led me to realize that it's going to be really important for us to understand what's the target. regardless of which solution we choose, what's the target? What are we trying to build? How big is the press box? What type of facilities do we want? How many concessions areas? The restrooms are going to be, the size of your restroom buildings are going to be dictated by the number of seats. That's kind of a given. That's going to be directed by code. But how many concession windows you have, whether you have multiple concession buildings on each side, all of these things will impact the cost for your stadium build, whether it's renovating and upgrading Tiger Field, whether it's upgrading Bronco Field or both of them, or whether you're building a regional stadium. And so working with Sam and Ty, we put together this little exercise that we called a good, better, best. It's really modeled around a very basic architectural programming exercise, and it's designed to help us understand what's the best fit for Belton ISD. And we took a look at the basic stadium elements, including the press box, the field house. Chris, you asked about how that works at a regional stadium. A lot of times there's a field house building that's basically 2 locker rooms and maybe an official's dressing area in that building, and maybe some storage for your field items like your chains and your marker, your down markers, and ice machines and things like that in a field house building. And those locker rooms aren't necessarily campus specific. They're just very plain and generic, and they're one's labeled home and one's labeled visitor. And it's just used, the teams go in and they dress out and whatever. So what we did is we designed this basic architectural programming exercise as good, better, best, doing a deep dive into the press box, the field house, the home grandstands, the visitor grandstands, the basic field elements in a stadium, and then basic site elements in the stadium. And we asked our focus group participants and we asked our long-range planning committee, take a look through each item of each piece of the stadium and consider what's best for what best fits the community here in Belton ISD. So in the press box, you're always going to have a home coach's room and a visiting coach's room. You're going to have a room for an announcer and you're going to have a filming platform. Those are the very basic elements of any press box in any stadium. Some of the optional spaces that you can find when you visit different stadiums and in the different stadiums that we toured is that you might have dedicated spaces for home radio and visitor radio broadcasts if they're doing live broadcasts of the games. Some stadiums provide a dedicated space for television broadcasts. For example, like when ESPN came in this year and broadcast the Lake Belton game. They would have had a dedicated room in the press box. And then how you want to handle media coverage. Do they have a space where they all go that's designated, or do you mix them in just a general space within the press box with other folks? Scouts, important guests. I've been to games before where they would honor a wounded warrior or a veteran at the beginning of each game, and then they bring the veteran and their family up to the press box, and they have dedicated space for them. Feed them dinner, thank you for coming, thank you for your service, that kind of thing. Do you include a room like that in your press box for your events? And then does the school board have a room? Or do you have a room for dignitaries if the mayor or council members or state rep or other elected officials come to attend? You have a designated space for them in the press box. So these were some of the things we asked in the deep dive, and what we wanted to ask of you all tonight was to take you through that same sort of exercise. I just went through all of the basic elements of a press box. Behind that, we've got field house, home grandstands, visitor grandstands, and field elements. And as you work your way across the form, like in the coach's office, we asked, a good press box solution would provide enough square footage or a room big enough to fit 10 coaches in there during the game. And it would just be, the room itself would be just one level. A better solution would be more square footage where you could fit maybe 12 to 15 coaches in there, and you would split the space where it's 2 levels. So maybe your defensive coaches are down at the counter below and the offensive coaches are up at the top. Because if it's one room and you're trying to put 10 people in there, it either gets really, really long, or if it's a square, then half the coaches have a countertop and the other ones are sitting behind them without a countertop, and they have to switch or whatever, So kind of thinking through the operations and how things work within that space. And then the best solution would be a large box that would accommodate as many offensive and defensive coaches and whatever that you would have, and you put them on 2 levels so they have dedicated spaces. And so what we wanted to ask you all to do tonight was to spend a few minutes to walk through these kind of item by item, line by line, and just rank 1, 2, 3. Is the good solution what's right for Belton? Is the better solution what's right for Belton? Or is the best solution what's right for Belton ISD? Regardless of what the stadium is, regardless if it's just redoing Tiger Field or if we build 2 campuses, this would be applicable to any direction we decide to head.
Is 1 being our first choice?
1 being
or
the
1
first
being
choice.
1 point?
1 being your first
Okay.
choice. Your
Okay.
first choice. Your
Okay.
first choice is we're going to go with the good solution.
Gotcha.
And you'll notice it says required and optional. It's also possible that you might want to say, you know what, I don't think a room for TV broadcast is necessary in our press box. And you just put an X next to optional, and you don't have to score that item. Like, this is not necessary for a press box. We don't need that in Belton.
And we would say that one of the reasons we asked Sam and Keith and Steve to be here too is if you have a question about one, it is a workshop, so we can answer any questions that you have to as you go through it.
So good is 1?
The first
Your
choice.
first choice,
Okay.
the one that would be most applicable in Belton, or for Belton, or the best solution for Belton ISD.
We raise the lights.
Yeah.
So is there a 2, 3, and 4, or is it just one?
Well, just for each line item, so in the home coaches, would your first
Yeah,
choice
big
be the smallest room that's just one level in the room, and you can maybe up to 10 people? Would that be your first choice for your home coaches, sitting in their dedicated space in the press box, or would you rather the coaches be in a little bit larger space that's split level?
What do we have now?
Yeah.
None of the above.
That's part of my problem with this is I don't know what we have now.
We have a 1 level for the home coaches, and the visitors coaches go to the visitor press box.
That should get a 1.
1, 2, 3.
Fits about how many?
I see.
Oh, do you do 1, 2, 3, or do you just do 1?
1, 2, 3, right?
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. If you don't want to rate one, just draw next to it.
Think about it this way: if you were to choose best for everything, and we estimate it out, and we go, oops, we don't have $120 million. What's the fallback? Where do we go next? Where do we go next?
But the point being, when you say if we choose best for everyone, you're saying if we put a 1
If we put a 1
under best for every one of those.
that means that's our first choice.
So in every line, they should have a 1, 2, or 3, or an X.
Correct.
Yes.
Great.
All right.
And 1 being your favorite, 3 being your least favorite.
Correct.
See the boxes. Okay.
I know, yeah, it's the box to the right.
I got
of
it
the-
now. I got it now.
I feel like we should play Jeopardy music.
Or something.
We have radio broadcast right now, right?
Not right now.
Maybe giving her
when we open the lakes, I'll call her tomorrow. Radio so we do stream all home games.
But we've had it in the past with our current facility.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And Texan Live streams all our home games. So they use the radio.
How many radio booths do you have?
One.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
How many scouts usually come to a game?
Depends on the game. Usually you're looking at about 8. Home, whoever's playing the home and visiting team the next week.
Does our room include snacks? Just kidding.
I don't know if this sways it in the middle of it, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Community rooms are often used as boardrooms, just FYI.
Yes, that'd be awesome.
How many players on a Friday night in the locker room?
6A, you can get up to 80.
Okay.
What's Cope? Cope, how many varsity players did you have one time this year?
So we had 64 for the playoff game. We'll have probably next year about 75.
Okay.
And our current setup does not look right.
Okay.
The last year at Belton High School, we had 86.
I know.
I mentioned something to this too, also depending on the option, choice down the road, whatever it may be, if it is a district, that both schools could be visitors, so this eventually at some point they'll play each other.
Well, that's kind of why I was asking about like 3 locker rooms or 4 locker rooms, right? Because we end up with 4 schools. Could we put 3 home locker rooms and let them decorate them out?
Or you do things like put those TVs in there and you do different graphics to.
Hey, there you go. See, now now this guy's thinking.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yep.
How we can do.
But seriously, do we need showers? In a shared
That is a
facility?
loaded question too.
I would hope so.
Yeah. We'd like to say yes to that, but
Well, I mean, it's listed as optional, so.
trends are interesting sometimes with that.
Okay.
But Sam, you're also talking about a different situation in a district facility showers versus your home.
Yes.
I mean, a district, I can't think of a district facility I was ever in that had showers because it wasn't on a campus.
Most of the ones that we go to do have.
Do they have them
shower
now?
options, Yeah.
Okay.
They're not robust.
Yeah. I mean, we're not talking, because locker rooms, obviously, but this is nobody's home locker room. This is not
No.
where they dress out during the school day and
But like
go to
for-
practice.
For Lake Belton, some playing Midlothian, I mean, they're not gonna get back on a bus and ride 2.5 hours after playing a football game, so a shower option for teams like that is beneficial
Mhm.
for everybody involved.
What was the one in Denton Ryan? Was that a shared
Yeah.
by all of the Denton schools, by all
No,
four
they-
high schools?
They have two, they have two stadiums now. When they opened Braswell, because it's on the far side of the lake, Ty, is that right?
Yeah.
They have their own, they have a district stadium too that's being, they have 4 schools that share 2 stadiums.
Okay.
They're more regional type stadiums.
What's a booster booth?
Where they can sell merchandise out of,
Oh.
gear, et cetera.
Fundraising.
Like what our vendor area is now, but dedicated space.
Promotions, specific promotions.
Well, look. Wake up and call me and tell me my kid left school.
I get that 2 days too.
I'm gonna check them out. I did. I got 2 for amenities.
We'll have to go quick through Phil.
One's home, one's visitor.
I'll postpone, I'll say a couple of things
Yeah.
about
It's the same thing.
sharing facilities with other partners.
That's the same as the.
Oh, you're right, okay. Wow, sorry, excuse me.
If we're gonna be playing each other, it changes your answers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And here's,
Absolutely.
you add that in there,
You want everything, yeah,
the equity piece of things?
yeah.
Absolutely. And there,
Well, but there's something to be said for a home field advantage, right? So even if it's 2 of our schools together, and one's the home, right, there's a home field advantage.
yep,
Well, it's home and home every year, so
yeah.
Right.
when you're home, you get the nice, the next year, you're not.
That's so nice.
So I can see it both ways.
Well, whether it's Lake
That-
Plain
That's all
Temple
required by the city.
or Lake Plain Temple,
Hey, Steve, they don't even mess with the required restrooms or anything, because that's all dedicated by code.
Yeah, that's all.
That won't be that big of a
dictated by code.
yeah.
Spend the way.
Yeah.
I mean, how many ticket
I
stations
always
do we really
love
need if we're
the
going
comment,
electronic?
well, we'll just park and look
Right.
around. For real.
Oh.
I've been to a baseball game and tried to park and never
Like
asked
for when
why.
Soccer
Yeah.
season is. So, minimum.
Right.
But the ticket takers appreciate it during soccer season.
Who do we give this to?
Steve, Mike, what do you want when people are done?
Just pass them back.
Okay.
No need for name
No,
for any purposes.
I don't think so.
Unless you,
Well, if it is right.
We started in Gillette? Okay.
So where we going next, boss? 5?
we're gonna, let them wrap this part up real quick after everybody's done, and then we're gonna dive into, real fast at number 4, campus modernization and capital renewal. And we're gonna breeze through that real quick, and then we'll go into 5.
We can do it here, right?
This is this
I'm gonna stay here.
We can.
Yeah.
We'll just have to ask others to leave,
Yeah.
or we can just walk into my conference room, either one.
We can walk into the
You walk in the Tiger or the.
Tiger Room.
Yeah. No, we have
Something going
some ESL programs going on down there now.
Oh, cool.
Good.
Oh, we can go, yeah, we can go in there.
Yeah.
I never realized what time it was.
Because it's been week for all in there. You get to talk about fun stuff and good people, it's all right. These are all the same. You need to learn this. Here.
Oh, I have it.
It tells you here, leaving the field of the dreams model, you build a thing that goes. There's a little bit to be said for that.
This isn't here. We used to have one of
You
those.
know, I do my best to try and keep my personal opinions out of some of this stuff, but there's,
Right?
that, we'll put it this way, we've been down
It's
the
like this, but put it in the same.
building a facility.
EA
As
local,
cheaply
and
as
you
possible.
flip it open, it would tell you, okay, here's everything.
And 17 years later, we're talking about building a
B, and you go to, okay, well, there's everything that falls under BC, and.
We gotta keep things like that.
Yeah,
in
because
the
when you
back of our
start
mind,
off,
Yeah.
everybody's thinking,
I'm the
oh,
first
you
one.
know, you know,
So we gotta be
yeah,
careful of our
yeah, you've been here
taxes.
for a while, you get it, but in the beginning, you're like,
We also gotta
so they gave me this
follow
big
through
book,
on that.
and it was, you know, told me, okay, well, this is what.
That section, then you can find it on the policy and the legal
Mhm.
policy. Oh, that's clever.
I absolutely do not like turning people away from programs like swim, because that's one of those sports that you
Yeah,
can,
I'm
you
getting
can
it
have as
too.
many people as you can fit in a
Who did you
facility.
check out?
I haven't last time.
Okay.
That was a good one, man. Oh.
Hey, aside from all those arguments, what's gonna happen Friday night lights?
Yeah. Well, you know, apparently, like, remember the guy that grows schools lunch in Scott?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
What's gonna
you
happen?
have to track down.
People are worried about that.
That is a catastrophe. You know, as a conservative, I don't want us to go and all that rather than this is just gonna create another this agency.
Absolutely. The conglomerate thing in your mind, people it's going to need to regulate stuff.
What does that go cost per year?
Oh, I think it'd be wonderful for us to review like our staffing over the past 5 years to see how much it's expanded.
Well, you can see what the cost of running this education agency is.
Mhm.
What that number Yeah. 2/3 of policies are legal. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so we just got policy update 122. Hey, Becca, how many policies are there? 122?
How many?
122. And how many of them are local?
That's my point. I'm like, we run the show.
No, it is.
Yeah, we run the show. 10 local policies.
We get 10 opportunities to weigh in on this.
But there should be
You know what I'm saying? I mean, 2/3 are legal. Those come from Austin.
So there are two music.
What if there's 120 something and only 10 are local, that's more like 93% they're coming from
In that situation, but I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right. Yikes.
I feel like I'm taking the SAT over here.
I know. I'm overthinking it.
We're promoting critical thinking skills, is that what you said?
So, yeah.
I think you go for the best and then Pull back.
Tailgate, yeah.
Right? That's what I think.
Some of these things, like, I don't know best.
I'd rather aim high and
It's
miss
okay
than aim
if
low
I'm
and
wrong.
hit. Right?
They decided to use classroom space for it when kids were in specials and stuff.
So there is,
If I aim high and I miss, but I aim low and I hit.
well, there's an art/flags here. This is the first one.
I feel like I did the third day of the bar when I turned my stumps in.
No, that's what I thought you were saying.
Right now, we don't.
I'm serious.
Okay.
I got through like a 40 minutes on that last day.
Let me double check upstairs. So that's the first one.
We know.
This is.
It's the same as biology.
I know,
just on
gee.
top of credit.
I've had those same feelings sometimes, you're like, how did I do it?
It was doing the blanket stuff last day.
Yeah. So I didn't know if
Because
you
they
had
just
any
decided, I mean, I was
recollection
I just.
Procedure.
You done?
Professor.
Did you?
But I'm serious. I told you I was out for
Do I need to put my name in the right-hand corner with the date?
Tailgating, is that even allowed?
Did you put your name in it? I did not.
You're not
Okay.
supposed to. You're not getting graded. Well, that's wrong.
Exactly. Dang it, why'd you do that?
Oh my gosh, what am I doing here?
Oh, last page.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people behind me. I was in the first row.
Oh, I'm done. Yeah, I'm screwed.
Teacher collaboration space for meeting in the classroom.
How often? How often
Because
do
we just
you
need
get a
a
chance?
separate space for teacher collaboration.
As often as you want.
But how often is it limited
I don't
in
know the difference
certain
between
times of the year?
Twice a year.
Twice a year?
Yeah, it was.
So if you, if, the elementary took it in August, it was 3 days, it's 2 days.
Yeah, it'll be
It's 2.5. Two full days and then a half days, that procedure. When I was
Because of this morning.
then you gotta
My neighbor
take it again.
slammed
Because when in an elementary, they all come at the same time.
Oh, gosh.
Like the space, and that's where they.
This is an adult crew?
Went to,
She's in middle school.
Oh, okay.
The rest of it,
That was never,
she was like,
So this is.
there could be, she could redo it.
Yes, like even so like,
Several offices,
in high
all kinds of
school,
stuff.
even adult.
Schools have one of their data points.
Yeah, the gym, that's where she,
yeah, a lot of them
I
do,
think they
like
carved
Baylor
out
has a super high rate.
Baylor has a big
All they teach is
designated
Texas.
area.
Yeah.
There's not a designated
Mississippi
space.
teaches
Unless you're out of space.
minority and
Well,
majority.
and that whole.
So you
And they're gonna have interactive panels, they can pull in
take all kinds of
six
electives.
interactive panels in a row, you have six different data sources. Blink of an eye, and you don't have to have it up on the wall.
Start changing, and I've got my 3-year-old and my 8-year-old. It almost happened, but it, and it could have, and that's why I'm not comfortable that does have
Included to be the notes,
families
right?
in there.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
I didn't take First Amendment. It's on the top.
Really?
And I had to memorize the stuff that, I didn't take negotiable instruments.
What's negotiable instruments? What's that?
Bank drafts, all those rules regarding stuff with banks, negotiable instruments.
I guess I blocked that.
I didn't take
We need full emergency backup in middle school.
So
Chris, I'm sure.
What's that?
Oh, it's
What? What are you saying? Oh, yeah, okay, talking trash about me. No. I was looking over to see how far we are. Cheat.
So what are the sweeters? Just
I
Suzanne?
no, I have.
Apparently, I was putting too much thought into it.
Let's talk a little bit, if that's okay. We're gonna keep moving. Steve, and what's next steps on that? What do you do after this?
Well, we appreciate the feedback very, very much. It'll be very interesting to compare these results with the feedback we got from our focus group and from our long-range facility planning. The next steps will be to take this and work with some design professionals and some contractors to start formulating more specific ideas around how to apply this solution at Tiger Field and build this vision at Tiger Field, build it at
Not Lake Travis.
Lake
Let's not build one there, please.
Sorry,
I mean, you can build it there, but you're looking for a job.
Lake Belton, or as a standalone facility on a neutral site, and figure out what it's going to take and what the action items are and what that might cost, and what those costs might look like.
Am I right in assuming the board would like to see your results from your feedback?
Yes.
I kind of figured that. So when you get those, please let me know.
Okay.
All right, Mike, next steps. Let's dive into modernization.
So-
We're going to move through this rather quick.
We are. A big portion, as we come back to y'all with a long-range master plan in January, a big portion of that is going to be around this concept of modernization. It's not a term that we've used a lot in the past, but it is going to be a strategy that we're going to want to discuss with y'all around taking campuses that are getting along in age and looking at planned replacement and refurbishment of school facilities at the end of their useful lives. So give you some examples of this, but it's really to take a facility to make sure that the facility's in good repair, upgrade the elements and infrastructure, make sure that it fits the standards and the safety codes, and extend the life of the building. So an example for us would be a facility like Sparta, Lakewood, Pyrtle would be three good examples of facilities we would want to enter into a modernization discussion around. They're all, Sparta and Lakewood were built in the 80s. Pyrtle in the late 90s. They've all had some improvements made and some capital major maintenance done over the last 30 years or so, but there hasn't been an exhaustive look at making sure that that is meeting up to our current district standards. Some of the things that you would address in a modernization is all of your facility condition needs, including major maintenance, so roofs, heating, cooling systems, plumbing systems, electrical systems, any necessary safety and security upgrades, addressing ed adequacy needs, addressing technology needs, and then prioritize capital needs from the principals and directors, meaning this building wasn't designed with an art room, but yet now we offer art. So what would it take to get a standard, something that meets our ed specs as an art facility in that campus, so forth. At a middle school, it might be this facility was not built with orchestra in mind. What would be a capital project that we would need to do to make sure we have, much like we're doing at Lake Belton Middle School right now. So from our facilities conditions index from 2021, we have a itemized list of a description of the facility condition need, the year that it's expected that the normal lifespan would run out on the existing equipment. And then we've taken that index cost from our 21 and we've applied 2023-24 pricing to that. So it doesn't matter which campus this is right now, but the campus we're looking at has about $4 million worth of needs between 2023 and 2027 that would need to be addressed in a modernization type project. So you're talking about in this one, it would be come in, replace all the carpet in the building, Paint the interior of the building, all doors and frames, $1 million in roof replacement, HVAC, so forth. And so we will have this level of data for all of our facilities. And so it would only, the older the facility and the less money that's been and capital needs that have been met, then the higher FCI cost it's going to be to address those needs. We also have the ed adequacy needs that were identified in that. We did not at the time assign a cost to that because there's some subjectivity to this. So when you talk about a multi-purpose room for teachers, there's a lot of different ways that could go. So what we will do on that is take input that we've gotten back from our stakeholders. We'll talk to others that are doing these types of renovations in schools, and we'll kind of come up with what square footage typically is for these types of improvements and what a cost per square foot is, and we'll be able to assign or estimate some costs that it would take in a modernization project to address some of these ed adequacy needs. And some of the major ones that you saw throughout our system and some of our older buildings are flexible, collaborative learning spaces, some of those sorts of things. So we'll be able to put some generalized terms to that as we come to you with some modernization estimates in the next couple of months. And so our next steps for modernization is as we take that data from our facilities conditions index, we take the feedback that our campus principals and our program directors gave us during October as part of this process, and we kind of create a modernization scope of work for each facility that's in need of modernization work. We'll work with construction experts to try to get some realistic cost estimates, cost per square foot and systems costs, and then we'll come back to you with some recommendations of when modernization needs to take place for each facility. So that will be part of our long-range plan. That will also be something that will be considered for future prioritization whenever we are talking about meeting needs for campuses, future bond projects, and things like that. Any questions? I went really fast on that, but I think the details on that will be really good. Steve's done a lot of work on this all the way back to our HPM team in 2020 and 2021. David Bennett, whenever he was with the district, a lot of work's gone into this over the last several years. We want to make it cumulative, and we want to make it something where we can look at it campus by campus, which campuses have the most needs most quickly, and what's a rough estimate of what it's going to cost to do that.
Reason we're bringing this to you now is that as we're talking about athletic facilities and stuff, we figured we should also talk about potential modernization of some campuses that we need to have, and we know we're going to need to have coming up. Right. We have while we're continuing to grow, we're not growing at 700 students a year right now, and we're able to have this discussion probably at a very timely moment for us as a school district, rather than being behind all the time. And so wanted to make sure that you start thinking about some of those older schools. I had a comment made to me the other day when I said Sparta was one of our older schools, and heads turned, and then everybody's like, oh yeah, it is one of our older campuses now. And we do need to think about the investment in some of our older facilities so that it sustains us over the next 30 years as well as we continue to grow as a school district. So please keep this in the back of your mind. We will continue to bring some ideas forward, but it would probably be our recommendation to think about modernization of some of our facilities in a bond cycle when we're talking about potential athletic bond cycles as well, because we're not talking about growth right now, and we might have the ability to address some of those specific needs at those campuses as well. Mm-hmm. Any questions for Mike or Steve on any of that?
Modernization would have to be a different line item in a bond, correct?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because Melinda and Mike got some clarification on something that I want to make sure that they can articulate here in a minute. But yes, when it comes to some general things, we could package modernization from multiple campuses all in one bond proposition. So like Proposition A could be modernization at 3 or 4 of our schools and addressing their needs all in one bundle. But the athletic facilities have to be separated out individually. Now, I was wrong on some things. I really thought that you had to separate any stadium that had more than 1,000 seats on separate line items. So that if you did 2 separate stadiums, you'd have to separate them out on 2 line items. But Melinda and Mike got some clarification on that, so I'll let them tell you a little bit about what they found.
I had worked with Glenn Opal, who's our bond counsel, and he stated that you do have to have special propositions for what are called special purpose categories. But underneath a special purpose category, like a stadium, if you had 2 stadiums, for example, that had over 1,000 seats, you know, it had to be a separate proposition, but you could put both stadiums on the same proposition. So in other words, you wouldn't have to do a separate one for one school, a separate one for another. Both could be on one special proposition.
What about, since they're not stadiums, natatorium would have to still be a standalone, no matter what?
Yes, that is correct, because it's
Okay.
its own
Its
special
own-
purpose
it's its own
category.
special- okay.
But that was actually good news to me, because I really
Yeah, you thought we had
thought
to
that you had to do
both
of those separate, and that was a definite change.
Yeah. That's
Not, I shouldn't say change. That was my mistake. That's good news for me, so.
Even though it's an athletic facility?
Yeah, it would be a separate proposition itself, but you could lump in multiple schools, stadiums in that if you're renovating them.
Versus what we had thought, which was, what happens if one passes and the other one doesn't? Now you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
So thank you for bringing that up, because I almost forgot to bring that up. Any other questions for Mike, Steve regarding athletics, fine arts, modernization, anything like that? I do want to give you a status update just on partnerships with other entities. As I mentioned to you before, we have, I think, some interested groups, and I've had continued conversations with some of them. I would ask the board to start individually thinking through pros and cons of what that would be in your mind of entering into partnerships. And I'll use a city as an example. Either one is fine with me, but a city that wants to share potential natatorium. One of the things that you heard that Sean laid out and Sam laid out was talking about space and swim lanes, et cetera, but pool space. But when you start to enter into partnership agreements, you might be encroaching on swim lanes and swim space. And so I'd ask our board to start thinking through pros and cons from all of those things that you might be thinking about regarding partnerships with entities. And start making a list of those. I'll talk to you individually about those, and we'll have more of a discussion the next time we talk facilities. Obviously, there's some interest from us as a school district to be more efficient with taxpayer dollars than we possibly could on our own. But I think we always have to analyze what the cost is, not just dollars cost, but implications for the school district. What's the implication for us as a school district by entering into those as well? And so please start thinking about those individually if you would, and I'll be touching base with you individually in the next month here or so, and then we'll talk about it again as a whole group coming up. Any questions on the partnership pieces?
So if we went in with a partner that also needed to do a bond transaction, is that 2 separate propositions?
Yeah, they would
Yeah, it
have
would
to have
have to
their
be,
own.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's some trickiness to a lot of
Yeah,
things
okay.
when it comes to that stuff, that's for sure.
Right, so hypothetically, if we went in with the city of Belton, right, on a new natatorium, and they also had to do a bond for their part of it, it would have to
And
be
theirs fails.
2 separate propositions. One could pass,
On
one
the
could
ballot.
fail. Yeah.
Yeah, different entities proposing bond funds for it now.
Yeah.
There are things that you can do. You don't have to sell the bonds to build at that time. You can go a
Right,
second
right.
round if one fails, you know.
Right.
But there are nuances and trickiness to all of that. So that, I think we have to go in with eyes wide open on anything. And frankly, haven't had any discussions with either city about where they stand financially and what they would be interested in. But yeah, I think we have to think about those implications for us as a school district too. Excellent. Mike, Steve, coaches, thank you. Appreciate you all immensely. Sam and Keith, your work on all of this has been outstanding. So thank you for the effort that you put into getting us to this point, studying this. I believe, and I got to say this about Mike and Sam and Keith and the entire team. Ty's been involved in a lot of this too. I really believe that they have studied things objectively. We all have opinions. Y'all know me well enough to know I have a lot of strong opinions on some of these things, But they've done a really good job of being objective in this to try and get to the discussion of what's going to be in the best interest of this community long-term, not just a personal opinion, but of this community long-term. And so I appreciate their willingness and their efforts to be objective and to bring us good information. And wherever the board decides to go with this, know that you got administrative support too. We've worked hard on this because we believe we need some investment in facilities, but we're excited and ready to do what's best for our community too, and that's where we need your guidance.
We appreciate you always bringing us the best information with all this data and all this research and all the work that others have put in on it to help us make a good decision. So we really appreciate it.
I think
Thank you, gentlemen.
we're
All
in
right.
a closed session.
Okay. Time is now 7:33 p.m. and the board will go into closed session for deliberations about real property, Texas Government Code Section 551.072, consultation with attorney, Texas Government Code Section 551.071, personnel, Texas Government Code Section 551.074, and student disciplinary matter, Texas Government Code Section 551.082. The time is 8:17 and the board will now reconvene in open session. There being no further business, we stand adjourned.